architect that did the study at the Annex, so tonight she's here to present her findings and to discuss our last presentation that she was here and the ideas. So I'm going to turn it over to Lynn. She does an excellent job, so thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
And if you didn't sign in, please remember to sign in, okay? Thank you.
I'm so glad that people came back. This is great. I wish there were more, but I'm excited to see you all. Thank you. Can you hear me tonight, or shall I use the microphone? Use the microphone? Okay. All right, two things going on here. Let's see how it comes out. Just to briefly go over what we did last time. We do have a team working on this project. Myself as the historic architect, structural engineer, the town of Plainfield, and the state of Connecticut through the Connecticut DECD is a partner as they have provided some of the funding for the grant. This is a two-part study. The first part was the conditions assessment, which we discussed last time. So I'm just going to very briefly remind you of what we found. The second part of the study is the feasibility study, which we'll be discussing tonight. So with the conditions assessment, the structural engineer and myself went through the building along with Chris and others to look at the condition of the building, and then we also ultimately, we looked at the history of the building, tried to understand its structural capacities, and any other information that we could gather that will help us to pave the way for future uses. We documented existing conditions without being invasive. There are things we still don't know, especially about some of the materials and whether they are hazardous or not. But basically, we feel that we need to gut the structure, and we understand that the shell, the framework, is a concrete framework, and it is in really good shape. From what we can tell, we believe that it will turn out to be pretty much perfect once we get rid of all the old plaster. And you can see from some of these studies that Beth, the structural engineer, pulled out from her old textbooks. This system was very popular in the 20s when this was built. Back in the 20s, concrete framing structures were all very different. Each manufacturer created their own system, so there are millions of them out there. This one's very close to what we have. So Beth is able to determine the structural capacity of the framing, which enlightens us as to the uses that will be able to occupy the building. The chart on the left is the framing requirements back in the 1920s for New York and Boston for different uses. And the chart on the right is what we have today. This is the historic live load, and this is what we need to meet today. So classroom areas back in the 20s were required to have 75 pounds per square foot. Today it's 40. So we meet that. So that's good news. Corridors and lobbies are the same as classrooms, 75. Now we need to meet 100 pounds per square foot. So that means we will have to reinforce the hallways in some manner. But we're good as far as assembly areas, which is critical because those big spaces in the middle rear of the building, we want to continue to use as assembly areas, I believe. So we meet those requirements with the existing framing. So now, tonight, we're at the feasibility stage. We started that a little bit last time we met, in that we discussed options that townspeople would like to see for the building. We discussed various options. We discussed the fact that this building, I think we were all in agreement that this building should be saved if possible. It's part of the fabric, the historic fabric of Plainfield that makes Plainfield a unique place. Plainfield is well sited and suited regionally and within Connecticut, and also the school is located centrally in Plainfield, so it has lots of possibilities, lots of possible places to draw from as far as populations. We identified particular uses that you would like to see, and then we kind of voted on those uses by use of the yellow stickers. I tabulated those uses, and we'll go through each of the top three uses that were established. I just want to also preface this before we get into each use by saying that we pretty much can do what we want in that building, in that neighborhood. It's R60. We have a lot of permitted uses that we've identified as they just fit right into what we want to do. So we may have to go for a special permit for some uses, but I think we'll be okay. So the possibilities, educational use. These were the vote tabulations, and you might be able to group some of them together. Nursing program was one that sort of stood out on its own, and it received quite a few votes. Career pipeline and technical education partner programs, they could be lumped together. I feel that I probably should have lumped them together, but on the list they were separated. So I left them separated, but I think they're pretty much the same thing. So that's a big number there. Satellite college programs were popular. Moving the school administration over, special needs school, United Community Services, and daycare were some identified educational uses. Then we had community uses. This included identifying the library as a possible tenant, the community center, senior center, and potentially internet cafe as a community gathering place, arts and culture center, historical society, and potentially a year-round farmer's market. So those were a lot of good uses. And I seem to have been missing a slide here. Oh, no, here we go. And then the third use was civic use, and that included the town hall and gathering space for boards and commissions to be more accessible to townspeople. So let's talk about the educational use. We're going to focus on the technical school and career pipeline. Those two groups, as I say, seem to be the biggest number of educational use components. So I looked into what is surrounding us. Plainfield circled in the middle, and you see the pins for different technical schools. Plainfield's right in the middle. To the north, we have Ellis Tech. To the west, Wyndham. To the south, Norwich and El Grasso, and there's another one. There's a Magnet High School as well. So we have a bit of competition, but maybe those schools don't fulfill all the needs that Plainfield would like to see, or the Plainfield business community requires. So I think that we can, Plainfield students, as I understand it, go to some of those schools now if they want this kind of training. We can bring them back, as well as other students from those communities, by providing programs that they maybe don't have. So I think this is going to take some serious discussion with educators and the state. The state has the technical education and career system, which is the umbrella for those technical schools. So I'm sure that speaking with them would see how much support they can give us for this project. There's their mission set out there. I won't really read it, but it's exactly what you have told me that you want to do. So your mission fits their mission, and I think it is a really good fit as far as providing academic success, trade and technology mastery, zest for lifelong learning, apprenticeships, immediate productive employment, and education responding to employers and industry's current and emerging workforce needs. So that's really important you voiced that, and I think that this type of system would be a really good fit if we can see how to align it. These different programs have, these different schools have all different kinds of career paths, and many, many different programs within each path. So there's really a lot to consider and a lot of valuable programs to bring here. So just as far as the building fitting those needs, the building was a school, so it's well suited to classroom, being reused as classrooms. There are 14 classrooms roughly. Depends on the type of program, you know, whether it's industrial arts, it might be more space than language studies or whatever, but there's quite a bit of space. It will accommodate 300 to 400 students, again, depending upon the program and how much space each program needs. So I think that the school is a good fit. You could possibly keep the larger spaces as common spaces for the school use and town use. I think you need resource spaces for the school, which could easily be incorporated into the larger spaces, libraries, tech labs, gathering spaces, lunchrooms. I think that those spaces can be very flexible. The next option was community center, which included the library, the senior center, arts and culture center, historical society, and farmers market uses. There was a lot in this category to fit into this building, and it doesn't all fit. So tried to do the best I could without knowing programs for all of these groupings. I know that you've looked at having a library in this building. This drawing is from the 2005 study that was done by Jagger, Cook, and Jepson, and showed a two-story library use in this building. I don't know if you have that need. I think that one of the suggestions of the report is going to be that we do a space needs study for some of your buildings, some of your programs, like what does the community center really need? How much space does the town hall need? How much space does the senior center need, realistically? I've given it a stab, and I think it's a pretty realistic stab, looking at your websites and the different programs that the senior center has right now. The senior center spaces are shown in brownish tan up there. The Historical Society is on the 3rd floor in green, and the library on the 1st floor. So you can see that we couldn't get everything in there, but I think it's a very nice combination. So arts and culture could be incorporated into the library. Internet cafe incorporated into the library. Farmers market, it could be outside. There could be an addition to this building. You know, I think there are other possibilities. And also, if you bring some of the senior center spaces and the community spaces from this building over there, then it opens up spaces here for potential farmers market, maybe. Thinking that this would be community center space. So the community center works well in this building. One would have to open up some walls, I think, to create larger spaces for the seniors upstairs on the 2nd floor, which is fine. There are bearing walls, but they're not really too intrusive. And the 3rd option was the town hall option, town offices and boards and commission space. And the fit out here was really, there was no room for anything else. So town hall, all the blue are town offices, more public offices on the 1st floor, the assessor, the selectman, the tax collector, the town clerk, and then building uses on the second floor, planning and zoning, building, housing authority, fire marshal, and on the third floor, some meeting rooms and the financial people. And you get assembly spaces for town meetings, etc. in the assembly room. You potentially have an arts and culture room in the back. You know, I think you can use those large spaces for a variety of town functions and community functions. So I think that that's a good fit too. So 3 good fits here. Not knowing fully the program for any of these, I've had to be very general with the costs. And I'm just giving you an order of magnitude because I know nothing about the materials at this point, or what kind of windows, or what kind of flooring, etc. So it's very general, but we have to go in and do selective demolition. That's taking all the finishes out now that have collapsed, basically. So there's a definite cost to that. 3 floors of bringing things back to structure. I believe that there will be some site work, maybe not $100,000. I'm not clear on all the utilities at this point in time. I need to do further research on that if we have everything we need to plug back into this building. And landscaping, parking, those kinds of issues based on the future use. And then new construction, I've worked with a square footage cost to arrive at $6 million. General conditions include the cost of a contractor. The new construction is materials and labor only. So general conditions are bonds and the overhead for the general contractor. Then there's a construction manager included in that as well, bringing us to $8 million with a 10% contingency and also some design fees. So roughly $9 million. Very, very rough. But I just want you to understand, you know, this is kind of the realm of where we are. But there are lots of funding opportunities. And it's very program dependent upon who you go to is very program dependent. So if the building becomes a school, we can get some funding from the state of Connecticut, school construction grant program. If it's a library, we can get some money from the State Library Association. There are USDA grants for community development, grants and loans. There are small cities community development block grants, and technical assistance grants to keep us moving along in this first phase of understanding. Historic preservation grants, there are brownfields grants that will help us clean up the building. So there is money out there, but we have to look hard for it. So the next steps include mothballing the building, and we really need to do that this year if we can. So that when you mothball a building, you'd really like to clean out all of the interior wet plaster and stuff that's in there. You don't want that sitting around for 4 years until you can get back to new construction. So that portion will include boarding up the windows, patching the holes in the roof, making sure the gutters work to take the water away from the building, and cleaning out the interior of the building. I would also suggest that this year we need to do a hazardous materials assessment so we know what we're dealing with before we do the cleanup. That will make a difference to the cost of the cleanup. I have used abatement numbers in my $400,000 number here. It's $400,000 on this page, it's $500,000 on the other page because I don't want to take out the windows at this stage. So we'll take out the windows later. And so also this year I think we should try to convene a study group to determine if you want, well, which direction you want to go in, which is most beneficial for the town. The school concept, I think, is rather standalone. The town hall means you're moving paper cups around and juggling spaces. But it may be something that's very important to do, and you have an opportunity to do it at this time. So I would suggest that a committee be formed to really, really study the town needs, space needs of each organization, and whether they're being met currently or whether they can be improved by moving to this building. And also, perhaps if you determine to go ahead with the educational approach, then putting together a task force that will look at the businesses in the area and see what their needs are. Work with the other technical high schools and see what they're missing and what we can provide here. So that we can come up with a really good partnership to sell to the educational funding groups and develop those business partners, because we want them to name the laboratory and we want them to contribute to funding this construction. So those are the next steps as I see it. And then, you know, if all goes well and we can get some funding together, we can start designing this building, whatever it is, in 21, and building in 22, and then occupying in 23, which is the 100-year anniversary of the building. So serendipitous. But it's very exciting. The potential is just really exciting. So my final steps would be to hear your comments tonight and incorporate them into the report. So I'd love to hear if you have comments to make, if I should look at things differently, in more depth, whatever you think, I will take under consideration. Behind you, Marion.
Hi. I think it being turned back into a, April Wojcik, Town of Plainfield. I think we should turn it back into a school. And to ensure that we do not compete with Ellis Tech, Norwich, and Wyndham, we would provide technical classes that they do not have, such as maybe welding, crane operators, maybe looks, you know, something in office work of some kind. It's just a no-brainer. I mean, it becoming a school is what we need in our town. This is going to allow our kids more options with what they want to do when it's their time to go out there and take over the world.
Right.
So I think this is incredible. I think we definitely need to do it.
I think it's a good fit. Yes?
Thank you, Board. One of the other things, if we turn it back into a school, some of the education dollars stay here, and we don't have to pay for the kids that go to Ellis, and the kids that go to Norwich or Wyndham Tech, because we pay tuition right now. So if we kept that as a school and did some of the things you say, I mean, with the committee, because I have no idea about a tech school, we could keep some of our educational dollars here.
I have one other comment. Another thought that comes to mind is maybe reaching out to a few of the larger businesses that are well established in the state of Connecticut. One of them that comes to mind is Electric Boat. Electric Boat has a lot of training, and if we could maybe utilize and take some of their training and put it into this school to prepare individuals to maybe work for EB, maybe we can partner up with them, or, you know what I mean? There could be a lot of different ways where we could maybe come up with the funding in order to do this, because you are saying that the funding is going to be kind of a hard road to tackle.
As educational use, it's going to be easier to tackle. Town hall, it's all in the town of Plainfield. But educational, you can share the costs.
With all the different options that you've shown us to apply for grants or loans or grants, are we allowed to apply to all of those, or are we limited to only if we're going to, you know, can we?
No, they'd love it when you
go for
more
it.
than one. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. How many students do you think go off to the other technical schools?
60. 60.
60.
60.
Wow.
So I know, Chris Bickett, I work at the high school. And I know EB has come to us. We're starting with the youth pipeline, youth workforce pipeline, because EB is just screaming for employees, screaming for welders, screaming for skilled tradesmen for kids, and that's a big need for this community. And I think there's a lot of educational funding for that. I think if you match that piece up, and I think when you talk about the building as a school, it's just not for our traditional students, it's for adults in the community as well, that we're providing service to them, help getting into the workforce. And I know at the high school, we just had our Perkins Grant committee today, where the various people from employers in town come to us, talk about the employability skills, and we're working hard with that. But I know there's so many businesses that would be interested in something like this.
Would we also be able to maybe talk to Westminster Tool?
They're our biggest supporter. They're at the high school. There is, and they're so enthusiastic. And so
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, great.
And one of the things, and George, you can correct me if I'm wrong, so George was a teacher in a school in Rhode Island, and that's exactly what happened, and you can explain it better than me, the companies would actually come in and fund the classroom. They would put everything in it that the students would need, and then there was no cost, like for us, to outfit the classroom.
I personally brought Icon Office Solutions into the school, and they provided $2 million worth of equipment at no cost to the taxpayers. And my students and other students went down there for internships, and they would spend 2 weeks. One of my students, after I left the school and retired, one of my students graduated. He went down there and he taught in Icon Office Solution for 7 years. He was actually teaching the teachers that taught him. So the results of this is incredible, because I could bring students in to testify to you people where their successes have been in life, and they're in their 30s and 40s. And I strongly suggest that you take a board and go visit that school. They have DuPont in there in auto body and auto mechanics, and they have digital paint booths. And these kids, when they go out of it, they got a job. They go to work. A lot of my kids that I'm still in contact with, they have their own business. One fellow's in design. Another one is he does weddings. He's a photographer. And one of the girls is a photographer. There's no end to the possibilities, and you have a viable workforce, not only in your community but in other communities. So they support the community by paying taxes and providing a service to an employer or their own business. So I strongly suggest that you go and visit that school. And if people are interested, I probably could set up a visit.
I know I'm interested.
Hmm?
I'm interested, so.
Okay.
You got 4 girls to go with you.
Hi, Deb Martin. Along the lines that you were talking about, Mr. Goodgood mentioned with EB, Westerly Learning Center, EB is heavily populated in that facility, and they have internships. They have where the students come in, and we actually, I work in North Stonington, and we bus students to the program, and they are learning a trade with the opportunity for employment upon graduation. Because in the school district that I'm in, not all those kids are going to school. They live in a farming community, and it provides them an opportunity to get the trade. And we all know the trades are just dwindling, and it's not just EB there, but if we already have that communication with EB, we can kind of give them a plug for something along the lines that Westerly has, and maybe build that alliance with Westerly, because they actually have a full sub cut in half, and these students are learning on the subs to do the trades that they would once finished, go on to.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity as well.
And here's the thing, we need to, I think we really need to put it out there or market it in such a way that trades dying out, it's not true. Without the trades, we wouldn't have what we have here in America. I mean, it takes all these different trades to have a building, to have electricity, to have plumbing, to have air conditioning, to have heat. So
The trades aren't dying, you're right. It's
No, they're not.
to support those trades that are no
So we
longer.
need to make sure that we market it so that these are tremendous jobs. These are wonderful paying jobs that people and families can support themselves. And if you can stay within your own community where you were raised and you were brought up, and you can make the community a better place, I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that.
And with a 54% poverty rate in the town of Plainfield, we could use some good
We
jobs.
could use, yeah, absolutely.
Some good paying jobs with some people buying the houses.
Right.
And that's.
I mean, it's just a trickle-down effect.
Yeah, it's a no-
It's just everything, and it's not gonna solve all of our problems, but it's a wonderful start, and it gives our kids something worth looking forward to. Not everybody wants to go far away and go to college for 4 to 8 years or what have you. You wanna get right out there, and some of us still like working with our hands, so.
I'm not starting out with a $250,000 debt.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. Secondary education is. Yes, sir.
Art Gagnon. I don't know much about trade schools, but who would fund this trade school when it's up and running? We fund our schools now, our town does. Who funds this trade school?
One of the things that we were just talking about is the companies themselves would fund the classrooms,
They would outfit the classrooms.
but they are also.
Yearly budget,
funding,
who funds this
And
school?
again,
That's-
we would apply for the grants, and then once that is up and running, that's all a lot of the research that we have to do that's going to go into this whole package, is once we come up with the idea, we find funding to do it, what's going to maintain it throughout the years.
No, you have to
keep
find
it
that
going.
first.
But that's what I said, that's part of the
Yeah,
research
okay.
part. That's
Okay.
all steps in the research.
Okay, well,
Well, Art,
that's
some
why
of
I'm
the-
asking the
Some of the
question.
things like she was saying over there is they have, EB has actually brought a submarine, cut it in half, and they've paid for that to go there.
That's okay. We will have a yearly budget for this school, like we do the high school or any other school,
Right.
okay?
They would bring
We're in
us-
trouble, every year for the past 3 years, we've been in trouble with BOE budget because of MBR. Now you're adding another school, who's gonna fund it? That's all I'm asking. Who's gonna fund it?
And those are things, Art, that we have to, like I said, part of the research, we have to figure all that out to make sure that it is something that we can do and that it will maintain itself over the years and be beneficial to the community, not something that opens up and then in 5 years, we don't have the funding for it anymore.
Right, so we'll find
that
out,
is an
we'll find that out.
important
That should be a 19, right? Factor, 2019 factor, not a 2023 factor. We should know
Right.
this year where it's going to be funded.
Yep. Once we decide, we haven't decided that's the best fit
Right,
yet.
right.
So once we do, that will be part of the whole project.
We want to know how to pay for it first.
Yeah, Dan Reel, Doherty Ave. I have some, believe it or not, I went to high school in this building on the 3rd floor of the annex. And it was sociology class, and that building was tired.
Very.
You remember that? You remember that
Very
floor?
tired.
That was a very tired building already at that point. Prior to that, I spent 3 years in Ellis Tech in electronics, so I have experience in the tech school, so I kind of know what it takes to have a tech school. You need like 2 instructors for the shop. You need like all sorts of different electrical, requirements, all sorts of different building code requirements. And after all this other fun stuff, life took its course and I became a paralegal. I have experience in construction litigation. And I also know that this town has a particularly bad habit of building things, but not quite like verifying that everything's okay. Like, if I'm remembering correctly, we have problems in the high school right now with like the roof the HVAC system. We tend to say, let's rush into things, let's build like this Taj Mahal of stuff, and then when we build it, you know, we go, oh my, A, we can't afford to sustain it, B, we don't need all this space, and C, you know, wow, it's falling apart. You know, so we should be very careful, because a lot of these older buildings, you know, you're talking about lead, you're talking about asbestos, something like, we may not necessarily know. You know,
But that's part of, too, Dan, what she's saying, that's part
right,
of the
but, you know, I mean,
process.
I apologize to all of you sincerely for like missing the first part, and I tried to get her as soon as I could. Was there a cost estimate onto just knocking the whole thing down?
I didn't publish that, but my estimate is $500,000.
And is that like a hard estimate, or is that like a
That's
guesstimate?
very soft.
Because we don't quite know what's going on environmentally.
No, but that includes my estimate of abatement. First, we need to do a study and see what's in there. And
Yeah.
then we need to account for
Yeah,
that.
because if you're dealing with a brownfield site, or something like you just find out it's a brownfield site, obviously, as much as we really need tech jobs very badly, I mean, every employer that I've talked to, they're like, yeah, you know, we don't have guys that can, you know, weld. You can make a lot of money as a welder. You can make a lot of money as a plumber, you know, very easily. You know, but the whole thing, that's all well and good, but like if we have a building that turns out to be a brownfield site, you know, now the feds are down here and they're like, well, you shouldn't have done that. And I guess this is kind of one thing, you know, we really don't have all the information. It's one of those things where we should measure 5 times, maybe like think about cutting once and then maybe do it.
Absolutely, and I think that's what just, hey,
Yeah.
this is what we're throwing out to you guys.
Right, we're spitballing
Everything
here,
that
but I
you-
just want to say,
right,
like, we should.
Everything that you're saying is good questions, and they need to be
Right.
answered. And I believe that all of us in this room are smart enough to know that when she
Yeah.
gets done with this presentation, and we all sit down and we're like, okay, so what are we gonna do? We all know, we're gonna do a much better job this time around than maybe whatever took place 10 or 15 years ago.
Say even with a
right?
high school, where I'm going with this is, I would want, you know, a solid environmental guarantee from an environmental company that was say bonded.
Yeah.
You know, so they would, you know, have like some skin in the game in case their estimate was off. Maybe I'd want someone from like, you know, this, you know, the state building inspector, the state fire marshal to come in, you know, and say, okay, well, I physically looked at this and here's what's going on. But the other thing I think that we really shouldn't probably rely on is so much of the education funding. Because the days of that education money, it's going away. You know, because the state, quite frankly, has not been responsible. We can't count on it. So if it's something that we're gonna do, we're gonna have to think about a way to be a little more self-reliant.
So we need to do our homework.
Like a
and
partnership
find
with
out-
EB or one of those, you know,
Absolutely,
type
so
of
we
outfits.
need to do our homework. These are good
Right.
questions that we need to have written down and
Yep.
say to all of us as a group, all right, guys, these are the things we're up against. Can we find a solution to what we're bringing to the table? That's all we're gonna do, and that,
Yep.
all of us coming together, putting the hard questions out there. Let's find out
Yep.
the answers to them. Let's see if we can find
Yeah.
a solution. Because
Although
listen,
you and I,
guys are
having
making
been in
great-
that building, we agree it's a
Right.
bit like,
Yeah, listen.
we
yeah.
might want to be a little careful.
But is this a hopeful thing to think about? Yes, absolutely. So
Yep.
let's do our due diligence, let's
Yep.
do our homework, let's ask the tough questions, let's get them answered, then all of us come back to the table again and say, okay, is this feasible for us? Is it gonna be sustainable?
Yep, and get
And
some
go-
real
yeah,
data from people that are
absolutely.
willing to commit and say like, yes, I have a
I
bond,
believe
I have
the
this
town
company,
selectman is
so.
looking to do that, and I believe everybody in this room is looking to do that.
Yep.
I'm on board with you, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's get down, roll our
Looks
sleeves up
like a
and
good
do it.
idea, you know, if we trust but verify, we'll find out, you know, and great, we may be pleasantly surprised, but if we find out it's a brownfield site, well, let's just be honest about that up front.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I don't wanna waste my time.
As I said, the next steps are,
Yep.
I think, pretty clear. Whoops. Right. You need to have an environmental person come into the building and test and tell us what's in there and what it's going to cost. That's simple.
Actually,
It just takes
I
some
hate
investment.
to cut you, just really quick if I may. What are we spending right now in security or insurance, do you know?
I do not know.
Yeah, because I know buildings like these are typically what we call in the legal industry an attractive nuisance,
Yes.
where kids just kind of run in and slip and fall. And So that's a risk too.
Right. There are present-day risks. That's why we're recommending mothballing the building and ensuring that it's secure from weather as well as vandalism. So I think, there is some upfront investment that needs to be made, but there are also deep brownfields will help us do removal of hazardous material. So, I think we need to look hard to find these grants. They're out there, and, we might not always be on the funding cycle that we'd like to be on, so it just gets dragged out and dragged out. That's why we have to start now, soon, because this building will not last forever without help.
And that's what we need.
No, last time we met, we had several ideas on the papers that we, that we put the stickers on to. Do you have those results?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, that's all right. Let me see. I went too far.
I apologize.
No.
I wasn't sure, we only talked about tech possibilities, so I wasn't sure if anything else was on the table.
Yes, so we tallied people's wishes, and this is the tally. I know you can't read it, but the first blue line is educational, and I think there were 58 positive responses to an educational use. The next one was civic, there were 9. Then it was business use, a business incubator kind of building. I think there were 6 for that. And community use, there were 38 for senior center, community center, historical society, library. And then housing, there were 3 affirmatives for that. So that's why we came up with the uses of educational, community center, and civic. And when we went through the plans, the educational use just fits like a glove. The other uses do fit. They're going to take a little more finagling. I mean, these are classroom-sized rooms, so you may be tearing down a few walls to get larger spaces that you need for senior exercise class or whatever, but certainly doable. Nan, you had a question before?
No, I was just going to ask if you could just explain the importance of mothballing the building as opposed to leaving it open to the elements like it is now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know when the last time any of you were in there, but it was a couple months ago for me, and water is just pouring in the upper floor. There's a hole in the roof this big, and it has no place to drain. Well, it drains on the old concrete roof. There was a flat concrete roof on the 3rd floor, and those drains come directly into the 3rd floor classrooms. So the ceilings have come down. The water is now penetrating into the lower floors. The 1st floor has an inch of water almost everywhere, and it's coming from above. So it's all coming down, and we think that the structure's in good shape now. The finishes have been ruined. All the plaster needs to be removed, but the rebar in the concrete structure is not so far exposed. So that's good, but it won't stay that way forever. We need to stop the water penetration. The roof has ponding on it because the gutters have not been cleaned. And simple things like that. The windows, as you see, as you drive by, have been broken. They need to be boarded up, but there also needs to be ventilation allowed into the building. And we can't leave all that wet material in the building. There are birds flying around. There's a lot of guano everywhere, which is hazardous material. So that's the importance, I think, of cleaning it up, because ultimately the water will hurt the structure. Yes?
Madeline Crisillo. I've noticed in the whole 10-town area that in the rehabilitation of several buildings, they use the Women's Institute. Would that be a possible source of funding?
I think that they're focused on housing in particular. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's their focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just housing?
Yeah. Yeah. So they're very committed to that cause and do a lot of great things. Well, I would suggest that this report will be in the selectman's office, and you can maybe even put it online if you want, as a PDF, so everybody can read it. I think that the next step really is to determine, and I don't know quite how you want to do that, townwide vote to get a sense of direction. I mean, I'm hearing educational, but is that the final word tonight? I don't know. So that needs to be determined, and then I think a study committee needs to be put together to ask those hard questions and figure out where the funding is coming from, and make those partnerships that are going to be so important to financing this building, and talking with the other schools to see what's missing, and talking to the students that have gone away. Why did they go away, and what will bring them back? I mean, 60 students is a lot to bring back. And the tuition from others coming into a program that we create that's unique is going to help fund the school as well. Yes?
The $50,000 for the mothball, part of the portion of it, that would come from the town would encumber that cost?
I have not really pinpointed where that cost comes from. I don't know if the town has the money to do that, or if the State of Connecticut Historical Commission, this is where I think it could maybe come from. They have construction funds. They want to protect historic resources, so they may well fund that. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Dan Reel, Doherty, I would just kind of say, if this was all up to me, which it obviously isn't, but I'm just saying if I were to like approach this, I would say the first question would be the environmental assessment, you know, because we got to find out what it is. Yeah. You know, and if we find out this is completely a brownfield site or a train wreck or what have you, then we go, okay, it can't be all these things we have high hope for. You know, but once we get to that step, then we can start thinking, what are the possibilities? I think the important part is we don't put the cart before the horse. We assess what it is, because otherwise, you know, human nature being what it is, we're going to get wrapped up in like, I would really like it to be this thing, but, you know, we don't want to get too far down along a track because we might find out there's no possibility.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest in the next steps that is one of the critical things that needs to be done, is the assessment. And I'm not quite sure if Brownfield's group would pay $10,000 for an assessment, or whether that's a cost that the town needs to come up with.
But either way, then, am I correct in saying whether the building gets reused or torn down, we still have to do an assessment study, because
Yes.
we have to know what we have to clean up. So either way, whether we rebuild or we tear down, we still have to clean up the site.
Yeah,
so there's a cost to it.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
And if I could, the Department of Economic and Community Development, Office of Brownfields, does have assessment grants that we could apply for.
Okay.
So we could apply for funding to cover that, and it's 100% grant.
We just need to, and my report will do some of this, align expenses with funding opportunity. And I can put in the funding cycle and exactly what it could use. It could by going somewhere else, but there's really something else.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, but they could choose one of ours instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I think it's going to be a sensitive conversation to figure out what is necessary, or what fills the niche.
Chris, do you know, like, what are there waiting lists at the other schools? I know culinary at
So
OSF.
there's waiting lists by what you want to specialize in. Electronics being most popular, masonry being the least popular. These probably, of that 60, most go to Ellis, some go to Georgia Tech, some go to some of the magnets. But it's important that if you made that an educational center, and again for adults and for students, you don't. It would not have to be necessarily the trades. There's also a huge market for health careers, which we could do, biotech and things like that. And we look at that, and I think the educational side makes the most sense from the state, because that's where the money is, especially if you look at the economic situation of the town and the childhood poverty rate in town. There's a lot. And London is urban, where they're building a $90 million high school right now, well, on the state's dime. But so I think the money is there, and I'm thinking, I'm just speaking as a private citizen, not as a representative of the school system. I don't want to overstep my bounds. But I think the money is there, I think the need is there, and I think the need for economic development and workforce training is definitely there. And we either have to do what? We either have to leave the building as it is, tear it down, or refurbish it. Those are our only three options. And so it makes sense to explore all those options, to explore the environmental impact, and then look at the funding revenue sources and what we can do.
And I think when you really think about that, you said the three choices: leave it there, refurbish it, or take it down. One of the things, we can't leave it there because just the short term that I've been here, many people have said to me, we really need a blight ordinance. We need to be able to clean up. Well, how can a town put a blight ordinance forward when we have property that looks like that? So that really to me is not an option to just let it sit there. So I really think there's two options. Yes.
Right, I guess I would kind of tend to agree with that. I mean, because just like Command, which fortunately is in a receivership, the problem we have with Command is like it's not secure, people can come in and go, but at least we can complain to the receiver appointed by the Superior Court and say, hey, you need to fix the fence, you need to like do this, you need to do that. And if the receiver doesn't do it, we can at least complain to the court. But like with this building, it has the risk of becoming another interroyal fire or whatever right now. I mean, so as much as it's nice to say like, gosh, I hope we can get these grants and this and that and, pretend that we have time, like we never know. Like maybe tomorrow that fire could happen. So I would probably say like if there's any way we could at least secure the building so that doesn't happen, that would be smart. And it probably wouldn't take like this huge amount of money, which clearly we would have to expend, rather than make a problem worse. But that would really seem to be the first step, and then, study the environmental stuff and figure out what we're dealing with. But I wouldn't necessarily, indulge this idea of, let's pretend there's grant money for everything that we can get like right now, like we have time to wait. Because if you've got water coming in through the roof, that's a problem. Like, putting this in perspective, let's just say this wasn't a town. Let's just say you were appointed receiver of rents right now by the Superior Court over a property that was in distress. You would be in trouble if you didn't go address that hole in that roof now. Like, the judge would be very angry with you, and he would say, well, plaintiff or defender, whatever, go file a claim on his bond. I think that's kind of the state of where it is now.
I think it's in the works.
Yeah.
The roof repair is in the works.
Well, but I'm just saying, at least, secure it, something like right now.
Yeah. But we do need to find funding to.
But my point is, we can't wait, we can't wait on that. If a grant happens later, great, but let's not wait.
That's right. We need to do it. It's a priority in that. Sorry. It is one of the first priorities. Are there other comments? Well, I hope that the momentum continues, so let's figure out a way to make that happen. I think you all have some great ideas, and you're committed to this building and to the careers of the youth in this community, and that's just, and the adults. It's really important and very commendable. So thank you for your input. And I really am a believer that we can make this work.
I appreciate all the work you put into it.
Oh, my pleasure. This is what I love to do.
Thank you.
Can I make one more comment to the first selectman? Could we put out a notice, like, very shortly to get a committee together to look into these things?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Lynn's proposal and the steps, and that's what I'm gonna follow, is the steps that she said we should follow. And
Yeah,
yes,
she
that's
said
an
we should
important-
convene a
yes, she
committee.
did.
It-
So that is an important
We could
step.
get a notice out on the website or something to interested parties or whatever.
Yes.
Good.
That'd be great. Okay.
So at this point, the 50,000 to mothball the building, is that correct?
Yes, that's my estimate.
Is that the action item that we have on the table at this point? Is that what we're looking to do right now?
Well, I think actually the very first thing
Is the assessment?
is the assessment, yes.
Okay, and is there, what's the cost associated with the assessment?
Roughly 10,
The 10?
yeah.
Okay, so at this point, do we have a means to gather that 10 to move forward with that step?
I think that we can do that without the report being finalized. Mary Ann knows the Brownfields task force and the monies, the programs that they have to help us do that.
Right.
So we can look into that right away.
It's a phone call away
Yeah.
to find out if it qualifies for Brownfield.
Yeah.
And then take the step.
Yes, that
I'd be happy to
that would be
follow this.
that would be a really good thing to get off our plates if we can.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's an easy one, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I just have one more question. Really quickly, assuming that, we could, write the check right now and we're all good, how fast could that assessment happen? Let's just say we're doing this tomorrow.
Oh, I think within a month, they can get in there and write their report. Yeah, do the testing and write their report. They're very good.
So you have to do the RFP and the
But I was saying
request for
hypothetically,
proposal.
if all that was in place, like how fast could they do it? So a month.
From the time.
That's been my experience, yeah.
Are you gonna write us a $10,000 check? Yeah.
We'd be happy to. But you know anybody?
The mayor of Meriden?
Possibly.
Well, thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it, your input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.